Every evening after her shift ended, a young girl could walk home through the dark streets of New Jersey and glow. Her dress glowed, her hair glowed, sometimes even her smile glowed. To her, it felt like magic. To the other girls, it felt like proof that they had one of the best jobs in town. Clean work, good pay, no heavy machines, no coal dust, no factory grease. Just a tiny brush, a glowing dial, and a substance the modern world treated almost like a miracle. What none of them knew was that the same glow that made them feel special was slowly settling inside their bones, and once it was there, it would not leave. In 1898, Marie and Pierre Curie discovered radium. At the time, it seemed less like an ordinary element and more like a message from the future. It gave off energy. It could make materials shine in the dark. It seemed mysterious, powerful, almost alive. Very quickly, radium became more than a scientific discovery. It became a cultural obsession. Companies sold radium water as a health drink. They advertised radium creams, radium cosmetics, radium toothpaste, and all kinds of strange products that promised energy, youth, strength, or vitality. Today that sounds insane. But in the early 20th century, radium meant progress. It meant medicine. It meant modern science opening doors that had never been opened before. And then the war made it useful. Soldiers needed watches and instruments that could be read at night without lighting a match. Pilots needed glowing gauges. Compasses, clocks, and military equipment needed small marks that could be seen in darkness. So factories began producing luminous dials. And to paint those dials, they hired girls. For a young working-class woman in America, the job could look almost perfect. The room was cleaner than many factories. The work was delicate. It required a steady hand, patience, and precision. Instead of lifting heavy material or standing beside loud machines, the dial painters sat at tables and painted tiny numbers onto watch faces. The pay was good too. Some girls could make around $17 to $20 a week, more than many women could earn in textile work or domestic service. The job was paid by the piece, so speed mattered. The faster you painted, the more you earned. The companies preferred young women and teenage girls. Their hands were considered smaller, quicker, and more careful. In 1917, Catherine Sharp started work at a radium dial factory in New Jersey. She was only 14 years old. To someone that young, the job did not look like a death sentence. It looked like an opportunity. The girls talked while they worked. They laughed. They competed over who could paint more dials. At the end of the day, radium dust clung to their clothes and hair, and when they stepped into the dark, they shimmered. Some of them wore their best dresses to work, so they would glow later at dances. Some painted their nails. Some even touched the glowing paint to their teeth before going to the movies, just to surprise their friends in the dark. Nobody stopped them. Nobody warned them. The glow was treated like a perk of the job. The deadly part was not only the paint, it was the method. A watch dial is tiny. The numbers are even smaller. To paint them cleanly, the brush needed a sharp point, but after a few strokes, the soft brush lost its shape. So supervisors taught the girls a simple routine. Lip, dip, paint. Put the brush between your lips to make the point sharp again. Dip it into the radium paint, paint the dial, then do it again. Lip, dip, paint. Again and again. Dozens of times an hour, hundreds of times in a shift, thousands of times over months and years. Each time, a trace of luminous paint entered the mouth. The girls were told it was safe. Some were told the amount was too small to matter. Some had heard radium was good for health. But inside the body, radium is dangerous in a very specific way. Chemically, it behaves enough like calcium that the body can deposit it in bone. It does not simply pass through. It can become part of the skeleton. And from there, it keeps emitting radiation from the inside. Not for a minute, not for a day, for years. The cruelest part is that the danger was not equally invisible to everyone. Workers in the dial rooms were given almost no protection, but people who handled larger amounts of radium in laboratories often used shields, tools, and other precautions. Some scientists and managers knew enough to treat the material differently when they were the ones exposed. That difference matters. The girls at the tables were not making an informed choice. They were following instructions from people who had power over them and who kept telling them the work was harmless. So the routine continued. Lip, dip, paint. The dials kept glowing, the watches kept selling, and the girls kept swallowing tiny fragments of the future. The first warnings did not look like radiation sickness. They looked like toothaches. One of the most famous early victims was Molly Maggia, a dial painter from the New Jersey plant. At first, her teeth hurt. Then, one tooth was removed. But the wound did not heal. Then more teeth came out. Her jaw began to break down. Pieces of bone became so fragile that doctors could remove them with their fingers. Her body was collapsing in a way many doctors did not understand. Molly Maggia died in 1922. Her official cause of death was recorded as syphilis. That false diagnosis did more than hide the truth. It damaged her reputation and shifted suspicion onto the victim instead of the workplace. And she was not the only one. Other women developed the same pattern: dental pain, jaw damage, anemia, weakness, bone fractures, tumors, and bodies that seemed to fall apart from the inside. The sickness moved slowly enough to be denied, but it repeated too often to be ignored forever. One of the people who finally connected the dots was Dr. Harrison Martland, the medical examiner of Essex County, New Jersey. In the mid-1920s, Martland and other investigators studied the sick dial painters and found something terrifying. The women were still radioactive. Years after they had stopped working with the paint, their bodies were giving off radiation. The radium had entered their bones and stayed there. Martland's work helped prove that this was not a mysterious infection. It was not bad luck. It was not a moral failure. It was occupational poisoning. At the same time, the company's own investigation created another scandal. United States Radium Corporation had asked Harvard public health professor Cecil Drinker to examine conditions at the plant. His findings pointed to serious danger. But the version submitted to officials was altered to make the company look safer. The problem was not only ignorance, it was concealment. By the late 1920s, Grace Fryer understood that something had to be done. She had been a dial painter too. Her health was failing. Her spine and jaw were damaged. Her body was becoming evidence. But finding a lawyer was almost impossible. The company was powerful. The science was complicated. And the law was not built for a disease that took years to appear. At that time, many legal systems were better at handling a broken arm from a machine than a slow poisoning from a workplace. If the harm did not look like one clear accident, the worker could be left with almost no path to justice. Grace Fryer kept trying. After nearly 2 years, lawyer Raymond Berry agreed to take the case. In 1927, Grace Fryer and 4 other women, Edna Hussman, Catherine Schaub, Quinta MacDonald, and Albina Larice, sued United States Radium Corporation. The press gave them a name that would stay in history: the Radium Girls. By the time the case drew national attention, the women were already severely ill. Some could barely walk. Some were in constant pain. Their bones were weak. Their faces and jaws had been changed by the disease. They were young women, but their bodies had been aged and broken by something they had been told was harmless. The company delayed. Hearings were postponed. The process dragged on. And every delay worked against the plaintiffs because the plaintiffs were dying. That was the brutal reality of the case. Time was not neutral. Time helped the company. Newspapers began covering the story. Public anger grew. The image was too powerful to ignore. Young women who had painted glowing watches for modern America, now fighting for compensation while their own bodies glowed with poison. In 1928, the case ended in an out-of-court settlement. Each of the 5 women was to receive $10,000, medical expenses, and an annual pension of $600 for life. The company did not truly restore what had been taken. It could not. Money could not rebuild a jaw. It could not remove radium from bone. It could not give back the years the women had lost. But the case changed what people were forced to see. The Radium Girls did not instantly end the industry. That is important. Radium dial painting continued for years, though methods and safety standards changed. Over time, companies moved toward other materials and eventually towards safer, non-radioactive, luminous compounds. But the myth died earlier. The myth died when the public learned that a clean, respectable, well-paid job could be poisoning workers slowly. The myth died when a disease that took years to appear could no longer be dismissed as a private tragedy. The myth died when ordinary young women forced doctors, courts, newspapers, regulators, and employers to look at the invisible damage done by work. Their story helped push the idea that occupational disease was real, measurable, and legally important. Not every injury happens in an explosion. Not every dangerous job looks dangerous. Sometimes the harm is quiet. Sometimes it is beautiful. Sometimes it glows. That is what makes this story so disturbing. The danger did not look like danger. There was no smoke, no bitter smell, no burning skin, no warning that a human body could feel with instinct alone. There was only a soft, greenish-white glow on dresses, hair, hands, and teeth. To the girls, it looked like a miracle of science. To the companies, it looked like profit. To history, it became a warning. The Radium Girls remind us that progress is not automatically safe just because it is new. A technology can look clean, modern, and elegant while hiding a cost inside the bodies of the people who make it possible. And that question did not disappear with radium paint. How many jobs today involve materials, systems, or technologies whose dangers we still do not fully understand? How many risks are we calling harmless simply because we do not yet have the right instrument to measure them? Next time, we go much further back, to a profession that existed for thousands of years, was treated as sacred, and was built on one of the strangest beliefs about the human body and the future. These were people who tried to read destiny in what remained after an animal sacrifice. Their job was to look inside the dead and tell the living what would happen next.